So
It's
over the
true.
course of your life, we've talked a little bit. You've mentioned it. You've written a lot of songs. You've performed a lot of songs, but you've also produced some killer records too, including one of John Prine's absolute greatest albums called Pink Cadillac. Um,
Yep.
of course, you did that one with your brother Knox. What I'd like to hear is what are some of the lessons you may have learned from your dad in the production side of music.
Well, I hate to keep going back to the word of feel, but that's what you're really hunting for in the studio is feel in the music. You could take a. My dad told me this. You could take a hollow stump out in the middle of the jungle, stretch a dried animal skin over it, and tie it down real tight, and give some guy with some sticks who has some rhythm, and let him beat on that, and you've got music. You can dance to it, you can sing to it, and it's got feel. But the guy beating on the drum or the stump has to have feel, or it's not. It's just a bunch of sounds. So we're always searching for feel, and he always said, "Don't overproduce. Don't put too much on it. Don't feel like you got to put a bunch of stuff on there that's not needed." And we actually asked him to come in there and do a couple of songs on the John Prine album. This was the first album John had recorded with his own band, and my brother called my dad up and said, and my dad was in retirement basically. I mean, as far as the music business
Mm-hmm.
goes, he said, "Dad, you got to come down and hear this guy, John Prine. He's so bad you're going to love him." And so it was a compliment,
Yes,
really.
it is
That
absolutely.
he said, "You're going to love him," and he did. He came down. He cut two songs. "How Lucky Can One Man Get?" and "Saigon" on John. And as much as I hate to admit it, those are the two best songs on the album. You know what I mean?
Well, I
But when you
mean,
got when you got a master behind the board
yeah.
and the producing and using psychology, and he was going to the 2 track. We had 16 tracks, but he didn't care anything about the 16. He was mixing whatever he was recording. That was the record. I mean, he was mixing. He wasn't gonna go back and remix it. You
And
know
it's
what I
like
mean?
one of those hold my beer moments, right? When he walks through the doors.
Yeah. And he told John. He said we were cutting Saigon, and it was really really fast, like triple speed. Da da Saigon, honey, 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 Saigon. He said, "John, can you cut that tempo in half?" He said, "Yes, sir, I can." He said, "Well, cut that in half and cut it in half, that in half." Which he slowed it down really really
Wow.
slow. And if you listen to the record, you'll hear how slow Saigon is.
Yes.
And he put the guitar amp in the echo chamber, the amp itself, which is unusual anyway, and it actually kind of blew the amp in the echo chamber. And everybody was going, "Wow, man, I don't know about that." And I said, "Oh no, man, that's shrapnel. That sounds like shrapnel going through the air," which it
Wow.
did when you
It
after
did.
and
Yeah.
the song was about Vietnam, is what it was
Yeah.
about. The guy had been in war at Saigon, and that's what it was about. So yeah, I mean, it's hard to put what he does in words. I mean, his presence in the studio is it's a demanding one without being demanding. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It's just you know who you're playing for, and the record company actually didn't care much for that record because it didn't sound folky and it didn't sound like all
Mm.
his other stuff. And one
That's what made it
one
great.
writer, yeah, and it got panned real bad. I think in New York and in L.A. One of those, I forget which one. One two there were two big writers at the time, and they one of them panned it, and one of them said it was one of the greatest things they ever heard, and that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So that when you got that kind of stuff going on, that kind of controversy, you've done something good.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. On the flip side of that, I know there has to be something of your own as well. So, what tools or techniques have you utilized over the years that were different than what your dad used to do? And I don't want you to talk about like upgraded technology either. I'm talking about like, actual tools of the trade that you practice that may have been different than your dad.
Well, I don't know really that there is anything a whole lot different because the way we were taught,
Mm-hmm.
get a good sound. Good musicians are important. Um, you know, Start with the drums and add everything else around that, and don't overdo it. And so, there was all kinds of different technology, like you're talking about. You didn't want to talk about, but there's digital reverb and digital all that. But
Right.
right now at our studio now, we have three analog echo chambers, which sound way better than any digital verb unit that you can buy.
Do you
Even
think your
today.
dad would be overwhelmed by that, or do you think he would just take to it like a fish to water?
I mean, what the
Just
analog still sounds
any
better?
of the new technology that you use nowadays.
Oh, I think he would take to a lot of the technology, especially you don't have to use a razor blade anymore to splice, or
Right.
fix things like you used to. And yeah, no, I think he would embrace it all, except I don't think he would use it as a crutch. I mean, there's so many people using this Pro Tools stuff as a crutch. Hey, don't worry about it. If you're a little bit late on your coming in, I'll just bump it over a little bit.
Hmm.
You can do all that stuff now. And my daughter's the same way. Hallie, she's very a purist when it comes to recording, and she knows what we're going for is feel. And actually, on this particular record, I just was the artist basically with the songs, and she and Scott Bomar, who co-produced, they were really good producers, and I kind of really liked not having that
Oh
that
man,
that
imagine.
responsibility on my shoulders, because
Yeah.
everything they asked me to do was right,
Yep.
and made things better. So it was kind of cool being the artist, which I use that word loosely, but
No, you
it was
definitely are. Like you're
you know
the star of the show in the studio then, and that not so much the guy behind the curtain. That has to be a wild change for sure.
yeah, it was really kind of comfortable. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just what do y'all think?
Yep. Yep.
They
That's cool.
that was pretty good. Yeah,
So let's
yeah.
talk about songwriting. Man, I'm a huge songwriting nerd. I've had a lot of very influential and highly awarded songwriters on the show over the years, and I always love to hear about people's processes for creating. For you, in your process of going from an empty page to a fully fledged song, what is the process like for you? Is it more spontaneous for you, or is it something you can also schedule in?
Well, I have two ways that I write. One is if I come up with a chord progression that has some feel to it, back to that feel word, and then I can write some words around that. A lot of times, though, I'll have song titles that I've heard somebody say or something,
Hmm.
and I'll write them down. I'll write everything that sounds unusual. I've got like 200 song titles on my phone right now that it's particularly useful if you're co-writing with somebody. Because if you go into a co-write with somebody, it's good to have an idea of what you might want to work on, and so have only one idea that the other guy might not like, then you got to pull something else out to get everybody on the same page.
Hmm.
So I don't even know where my phone is, but I'm just trying to see if I mean, I'll just give you an example. Let me find it here real quick. And this is, I mean, I'm just trying to think. Well, I've got so many things here. Love is worth more than money. Somebody said that to me. That's nothing. No, a bad good girl. That's a title somebody said. They're all gone but me. Uh, be your best on your worst day. These are things that people said to me. She was the right amount of loose. You
Hmm.
know, so it goes. I mean, it's just you just have to have some ammunition in your pocket when you go write. And I was in Nashville for a while, and the way they do it in Nashville, not all the time, but a lot of the time, you go into an office somewhere with another writer, and they're specifically writing for an artist,
Yep.
which is not a bad thing to do, but because you can get rich that way. But to me, the song comes first, and then you find the artist for it.
Hmm.
So that's the way I would work. I mean, I hadn't been a super huge
And
successful
some of the best
songwriter
songs
for.
in history have come that way too, where the artist was not thought of beforehand, and they ended up finding the song from
Right.
some, you know, wacky way they
Yeah,
found the song, and yeah.
I think you kind of water it down a little bit when you're writing specifically for somebody.
Mm.
Specifically for some of these guys. You think, well, and also what does radio want? I mean, that's
Well,
a big question in songwriting. You
I
know,
mean, I feel
what do
like
we?
if you're writing that way too, like you're as a songwriter, you're probably writing for somebody's strengths. And if you're always writing for somebody's strengths, then you're never going to hear their flaws. And the flaws
Yeah,
is what makes people vulnerable in music, I feel.
that's true. That's true. There was a telephone ringing in one of Sam's recordings on the blues artist, and he left it in there. You know, because he said, "Hell, we could never get that to happen again."
Oh,
The
like you
secretary
hear
was gone.
coughing in some records back then. Like
Yeah,
it added character to the song.
it
You know,
did. It
you would
did. It
never hear
perfect.
that nowadays, where you would hear like, no way, man. But like it happened a lot back then, and man, and we talked about identifiers earlier. We're trying to identify somebody by their voice. That was a good way of identifying people too. Was by those little flaws that you would hear in a song. Because
Absolutely.
they were definitely indicative of certain producers and engineers at the time, you know?
Perfect imperfection is what that's called.
Absolutely. Disorganized chaos, or organized
Right.
chaos, rather.
Yeah. Yeah.